Hello guys, and welcome back to Leah's Lifestyle. We're at it again with the Berkshire Hathaway letters to shareholders, and today we are in 1985. And so, just like before, we're going to do part 1, read about 30 minutes, and then you're going to have to find part 2 tomorrow. But without any further ado, let's start reading this. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Inc. You may remember the wildly upbeat message of last year's report. Nothing much was in the works, but our experience had been that something big popped up occasionally. This carefully crafted corporate strategy paid off in 1985. Later sections of this report discuss A. Our purchase of a major position in capital cities ABC. B. Our acquisition of Scott and Frietzer. C. Our entry into a large, extended-term participation of the insurance business of Fireman's Fund, and D. Our sale of our stock in General Foods. Our gain in net worth during the year was $613.6 million, or 48.2%. It is fitting that the visit of Halley's Comet coincided with this percentage gain. Neither will be seen again in my lifetime. Our gain in per share book value over the last 21 years, that is, since present management took over, has been from $19.46 to $1,643.71, or 23.2% compounded annually. Other percentages that will not be repeated. Another percentage that will not be repeated. Two factors make things approaching this rate of gain unachievable in the future. One factor, probably transitory, is a stock market that offers very little opportunity compared to the market that prevailed throughout much of the 1964 to 1984 period. Today, we cannot find significantly undervalued equities to purchase for our insurance company portfolios. The current situation is 180 degrees removed from the existing about a decade ago, when the only question was which bargain to choose. This change in the market also has negative impacts for our present portfolio. In our 1974 annual report, I could say, we consider several of our major holdings to have great potential for significantly increased values in the future. I can't say that now. It's true that our insurance companies currently hold major positions in companies with exceptional underlying economics and outstanding management, just as they did in 1974. But current market prices generously appraise these attributes where they were ignored in 1974. Today's valuation means that our insurance companies have no chance for future portfolio gains in the scale of those achieved in the past. The second negative factor, far more telling, is our size. Our equity capital is more than 20 times that it was only 10 years ago. And an iron law of business is that growth eventually dampens exceptional economics. Just look at the records of high return companies once they have amassed even $1 billion of equity capital. None that I know of has managed subsequently over a 10-year period to keep an earning 20% or more on equity while reinvesting substantially all of its earnings. Instead, to sustain their high returns, such companies have needed to shed a lot of capital by way of either dividends or repurchases of stock. Their shareholders would have been far better off if all earnings could have been reinvested at the fat returns earned by these exceptional businesses, but the companies simply couldn't turn up enough high return opportunities to make that possible. Their problem is our problem. Last year, I told you that we needed profits of $3.9 billion over the next 10 years, then coming up to earn 15% annually. The comparable figure for the next 10 years now ahead is $5.7 billion, a 48% increase that corresponds, as it must mathematically, to the growth in our capital base during 1985. Here's a little perspective. Leaving aside oil companies, only about 15 U.S. businesses have managed to earn over $5.7 billion during the past 10 years. Charlie Munger, my partner in management Berkshire, and I are reasonably optimistic about Berkshire's ability to earn returns superior to those earned by corporate America generally, and you will benefit from the company's retention of all earnings as long as those earnings are forthcoming. We have several things going for us. 1, we don't have to worry about quarterly or annual figures, but instead, we focus on whether actions will maximize long-term value. 2, we can expand the business into any areas that make sense. Our scope is not circumscribed by history, structure, or concept. And 3, we love our work. All of these help. Even so, we will also need a full measure of good fortune to average our hope for 15%, far more good fortune than was required for our past 23.2%. We need to mention one further item in the investment equation that could affect recent purchases of our stock. Historically, Berkshire shares have sold modestly below intrinsic business value. With the price there, purchases could be certain as long as they did not experience a widening of this discount that their personal investment experience would at least equal the fictional experience of the business, the financial experience of the business. But recently, the discount has disappeared, and occasionally a modest premium has prevailed. The elimination of the discount means that Berkshire's market value increased even faster than business value, which itself grew at a pleasing pace. That was good news for any owner holding while that move took place, but it is bad news for the new or prospective owner. If the financial experience of new owners of Berkshire is merely to match the future financial experience of the company, any premium of market value over intrinsic business value that may pay must be maintained. Management cannot determine market price, although it can, by its disclosure and policies, encourage rational behavior by market participants. My own preference, as perhaps you'd guess, is for a market price that consistently approximates business value. Given that relationship, all owners prospect precisely as the business prospers during their period of ownership. Wild swings in market prices far above or and below business value do not change the financial gains for owners in aggregate. In the end, investor gains must equal business gains, but long periods of sustainable undervalued and or overvalued valuation will cause the gains of the business to be inequitably disturbed among various owners, with the investment result of any given owner largely depending on how lucky, shrewd, or foolish he happens to be. Over the long term, there has been a more consistent relationship between Berkshire market value and business value than has existed for any other publicly traded equity with which I am familiar. This is a tribute to you, because you have been rational, interested, and investment orientated. The market price for Berkshire stock has almost always been sensible. This unusual result has been achieved by a shareholder group with unusual demographics. Virtually all of our shareholders are individuals, not institutions. No other public company our size can claim the same. You might think that institutions, with their large staff of highly paid and experienced investment professionals, would be a force for stability and reason in financial markets. They are not. Stocks heavily owned and consistently monitored by institutions have often been among the most inappropriately valued. Ben Graham told a story 40 years ago that illustrated why investment professionals behave as they do. An oil prospector, moving to his heavenly reward, was met by St. Peter with bad news. "You're qualified for a residence," said St. Peter, "but as you can see, the compound reserved for oil men is packed. There's no way to squeeze you in." After thinking a moment, the prospector asked if he might say just 4 words to the present occupants. That seems harmless to St. Peter, so the prospector cupped his hands and yelled, "Oil discovered in hell!" Immediately the gate to the compound opened and all of the oil men marched out to head for the nether regions. Impressed, St. Peter invited the prospector to move in and make himself comfortable. The prospector paused. "No," he said, "I think I'll go along with the rest of the boys. There might be some truth to that rumor after all." Sources of reported earnings. The table on the next page shows the major sources of Berkshire's reported earnings. These numbers, along with far more detailed sub-segment numbers, are the ones that Charlie and I focus upon. We do not find consolidated figures an aid in either managing or evaluating Berkshire, and, in fact, never prepare them for internal use. Segment information is equally essential for investors wanting to know what is going on in the multi-line business. Corporated managers always have insisted upon such information before making acquisition decisions, but until a few years ago, seldom made it available to investors faced with acquisitions and disposition decisions of their own. Instead, when owners wished to understand the economic realities of their businesses asked for data, managers usually gave them a "we can't tell you what is going on because it would hurt the company" answer. Ultimately, the SEC ordered disclosure of segment data and management began supplying real answers. The change in their behavior recalls an insight of Al Capone. Quote, "You can get much farther with a kind word and a gun than you can with kind word alone." End quote. Jesus. In the table, amortization of goodwill is not charged against the specific business, but, for reasons outlined in the appendix to my letter in the 1983 annual report, is aggregate of a separate item. A commendum of the 1977-1984 letters is available upon request, and the business segment data and management discussion sections on page 39 to 41 and 49 to 55 must additionally inform much additional information regarding our business is provided, including goodwill and goodwill amortization figures for each of the segments. I urge you to read those sections as well as Charlie Munger's letter to West Coast shareholders, which starts on page 56. Okay, this is the same thing that we've gone through most of these. It's the omitted pre-tax earnings, Berkshire shares of net earnings after taxes, the year of, the year prior, a year of, the year prior. On the left, all of the companies, and typically I've gone through every single company, what they were that year and the year prior, but just like the last few, I'm going to do pre-tax earnings totals of 1985, 613, 356, pre-tax earnings of 1984, 200,549, after taxes, 1985 total, 435,815, and after taxes, 1984, 148,895, which is a more than double. It's like triple to quadrupled their how much. So that's in a year, which is fantastic. Okay. Our 1985 results include unusually large earnings from the sale of securities. This fact, in itself, does not mean that we had a particularly good year, though, of course, we did. Security profits in a given year bear similarities to the college graduation ceremony in which the knowledge gained over 4 years is recognized on a day when nothing further is learned. We may hold a stock for a decade or more, and during that period it may grow quite consistently in both business and market value. In the year in which we finally sell it, there may be no increase in value, or there may even be a decrease, but all growth in value since purchased will be reflected in the accounting earnings of the year of sale. if the stock owned is in our insurance subsidiaries. However, any gains or losses in market value will be reflected in net worth annually. Thus, reported capital gains or losses in any given year are meaningless as a measure of how well we have done in the current year. A large portion of the realized gains in 1985, 338 million pre-tax out of a total of 488 million, came about through the sale of our General Foods shares. We held most of these shares since 1980, when we had purchased them at a price far below what we felt was their per-share business value. Year by year, the managerial efforts of Jim Ferguson and Phil Smith substantially increased General Foods' business value, and last fall, Philip Morris made an offer for the company that reflected this increase. We thus benefited from 4 factors: a bargain purchase price, a business with fine underlying economics, and able management concentrating on the interest of shareholders, and a buyer willing to pay full business value. While that last factor is the only one that produces reported earnings, we consider an identification of the first 3 to be key to build value for Berkshire shareholders. In selecting common stock, we devote our attention to attractive purchases, not to the possibility of attractive sales. We have again reported substantial income from special distributions this year. This year from Washington Post and General Foods. The General Foods transaction obviously took place well before the Philip Morris offer. Distributions of this kind occur when we sell a portion of our shares in a company back to a simultaneously with its purchase of shares from another shareholder. The number of shares we sell is contractually set so as to leave our percentage ownership in the company precisely the same after the sale as before. Such a transaction is quite properly regarded by the IRS as substantially equivalent to a dividend, since we, as a shareholder, receive cash while maintaining an unchanged ownership interest. This tax treatment benefits us because corporate taxpayers, unlike individual taxpayers, incur much lower taxes on dividend income than on income from long-term capital gains. This difference will be widened further if the House passed a tax bill becomes law. Under its provisions, capital gains realized by corporations will be taxed at the same rate as ordinary income. However, accounting rules are unclear as to proper treatment for shareholders reporting. To confirm this last year's treatment, we have shown these transactions as capital gains. Though we have not sought out such transactions, we have agreed to them several occasions when management initiated the idea. In each case, we have felt that non-selling shareholders, all of whom had an opportunity to sell at the same price we received, benefited because the companies made their repurchases at prices below intrinsic business value. The tax advantage we received and our wish to cooperate with management that are increasing values for all shareholders have sometimes led us to sell, but only to the extent that our proportional share of the business was undiminished. At this point, we usually turn to a discussion of some of our major business units. Before doing this, however, we should first look at the failure at one of our smaller businesses. Our vice chairman, Charlie Munger, has always emphasized the study of mistakes rather than success, both in business and in other aspects of life. He does so in the spirit of the man who said, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there." You'll immediately see why we make a good team. Charlie likes to study errors, and I have generally ample materials for him, particularly in our textile and insurance businesses. Shut down our textile businesses. In July, we decided to close our textile operations, and by year end, this unpleasant job was largely completed. This history of this business is instructive. When Buffett Partnerships Ltd., an investment partnership of which I was general partner, bought control of Berkshire Hathaway 21 years ago, it had an accounting net worth of $22 million, all devoted to the textile business. The company's intrinsic business value, however, was considerably less because of the textile assets were unable to earn returns commensurate with their accounting value. Indeed, during the previous 9 years, the period in which Berkshire and Hathaway operated as a merged company, aggregate sales of $530 million had produced an aggregate loss of $10 million. Profits had been reported from time to time, but the net effect was always one step forward, 2 steps back. At the time we made our purchase, Southern textile plants, largely non-union, were believed to have an important competitive advantage. Most northern textile operations had closed, and many people thought we would liquidate our business as well. We felt, however, that the business would be run much better by a long-time employee whom we immediately selected to be president, Ken Chase. In this respect, we were 100% correct. Ken and his recent successor, Gary Morrison, have been excellent managers, every bit the equal of managers at our more profitable business. In early 1967, cash generated by the textile operation was used to fund our entry into insurance via the purchase of National Indemnity Company. Some of the money came from earnings and some from reduced investments in textile inventories, receivables, and fixed assets. This pullback proved wise. Although much improved by Ken's management, the textile business never became a good earner, not even in cyclical upturns. Further diversification for Berkshire followed, and gradually the textile operation depressing effects on our overall return diminished as the business became a progressively smaller portion of the corporation. We remained in the business for reasons that I stated in the 1978 annual report and summarized at other times also. 1. Our textile businesses are very important employers in their communities. 2. Management has been straightforward in reporting on problems and energetic in attacking them. 3. Labor has been cooperative and understanding in facing our common problems. And 4. The business should average modest cash returns relative to investment. I further said, as long as these conditions prevail, and we expect that they will, we intend to continue to support our textile business despite more attractive alternatives used for capital. It turned out that I was very wrong. 4. Though 1979 was moderately profitable, the business thereafter consumed major amounts of cash. By mid-1985, it became clear, even to me, that this condition was almost sure to continue. Could we have found a buyer who would continue operations, I would have certainly preferred to sell the business rather than liquidate it, even if that meant somewhat lower proceeds for us. But the economics that were finally obvious to me were also obvious to others, and interest was nil. I won't close down business of subnormal profitability merely to add a fraction of a point to our corporate rate of return. However, I also feel it inappropriate for even an exceptionally profitable company to fund an operation once it appears to have unending losses in prospect. Adam Smith would disagree with my first proposition, and Karl Marx would disagree with my second. The middle ground is the only position that leaves me comfortable. I should re-emphasize that Ken and Gary have been resourceful, energetic, and imaginative in attempting to make our textile operations a success. Trying to achieve sustainable profitability, they reworked product lines, machinery configurations, and distribution arrangements. We also made a major acquisition, Wumbeck Mills, with the expectation of important synergy, a term widely used in business to explain an acquisition that otherwise makes no sense. But in the end, nothing worked, and I should be faulted for not quitting sooner. A recent Business Week article stated that 250 textile mills have closed since 1980. Their owners were not privy to any information that was unknown to me. They simply processed it more objectively. I ignored Comet's advice. Quote, the intellect should be the servant of the heart, but not its slave, end quote, and believed what I preferred to believe. The domestic textile industry operates in a commodity business, competing in a world market in which substantial excess capacity exists. Much of the trouble we experienced was attributable, both directly and indirectly, to competition from foreign countries whose workers are paid a small fraction of the U.S. minimum wage, but that is no way means that our labor force deserves any blame for our closing. In fact, in comparison with employees of American industry generally, our workers were poorly paid, as has been the case through the textile business. In contract negotiations, union leaders and members were sensitive to our disadvantageous cost position and did not push for unrealistic wage increases or unproductive work practices. To the contrary, they tried just as hard as we did to keep us competitive. Even during our liquidation period, they performed superbly. Ironically, we would have been better off financially if our union had behaved unreasonably some years ago. We then would have recognized the impossible future that we faced, promptly closed down, and avoided significant future losses. Over the years, we had the option of making large capital expenditures in the textile operation that would have allowed us to somewhat reduce variable costs. Each proposal to do so looked like an immediate winner, measured by standard return on investment tests. In fact, these proposals usually promise greater economic benefits than would have resulted from comparable expenditures in our highly profitable candy and newspaper business. But the promised benefits from these textile investments were illusionary. Many of our competitors, both domestic and foreign, were stepping up to the same kind of expenditures, and once enough companies did so, their reduced costs became the baseline for reduced prices industry-wide. Viewed individually, each company's capital investment decision appeared cost-effective and rational. Viewed collectively, the decision neutralized each other and were irrational. Just as happens when each person watching a parade decides he can see a little better if he stands on his tiptoes. After each round of investment, all the players had more money in the game and returns remained anemic. Thus, we faced a miserable choice. Huge capital investment would have helped to keep our textile business alive, but would have left us with terrible returns on ever-growing amounts of capital. After the investment, moreover, the foreign competition would still have retained a major continuing advantage in labor cost. A refusal to invest, however, would make us increasingly non-competitive. Even measured against domestic textile manufacturers, I always thought myself in the position described by Woody Allen in one of his movies. Quote, more than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other in total extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose correctly. End quote. For an understanding of how the to invest or not to invest dilemma plays out in commodity businesses, it is instructive to look at Burlington Industries, by far the largest U.S. textile company both 21 years ago and now. In 1964, Burlington had sales of $1.2 billion against our $50 billion. It had strengths in both distribution and production that we could never hope to match, and also, of course, had an earnings record far superior to ours. Its stock sold at 60 at the end of 1964, ours was 13. Burlington made a decision to stick to textile businesses, and in 1985 had sales of about $2.8 billion. During the 1964 to 85 period, the company made capital expenditures of about $3 billion, far more than any other U.S. textile company, and more than $200 per share on that $60 stock. A very large part of the expenditures I am sure, was devoted to cost improvement and expansion. Given Burlington's basic commitment to stay in textiles, I would also surmise that the company's capital decisions were quite rational. Nevertheless, Burlington has lost sales volume in real dollars and has far lower returns on sales and equity now than 20 years ago. Split 2-for-1 in 1965, the stock now sells at $34. On an adjusted basis, just a little over its $60 price in 1964. Meanwhile, the CPI has more than tripled. Therefore, each share commands about 1/3 of the purchasing power it did at the end of 1964. Regular dividends have been paid, but they, too, have shrunk significantly in purchasing power. This devastation outcome for the shareholders indicates that what can happen when much brainpower and energy are applied to a faulty premise. The situation is suggestive of Samuel Johnson's horse. Quote, "A horse that can count to 10 is a remarkable horse, not a remarkable mathematician." End quote. Likewise, a textile company that allocates capital brilliantly within its industry is a remarkable textile company, but not a remarkable business. My conclusion, from my own experience and from much observed of other businesses, is that a good managerial record, measured by economic returns, is far more a function of what business boat you get into than it is of how effective you row. Though intelligence and effort help considerably, of course, in any business, good or bad. Some years ago I wrote, quote, "When a management with a reputation for brilliance tackles a business with a reputation for poor fundamental economics, it is the reputation of the business that remains intact." End quote. Nothing has since changed my point of view on that matter. Should you find yourself in a chronically leaking boat, energy devoted to changing vessels is likely to be more productive than energy devoted to patching the leak. Okay, I think we're going to pause there. So if you find this on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon so that way you know every single time that I post, and leave a comment down below. How are you liking some of these quotes? I'm very much enjoying some of these quotes he's throwing in there and how he's comparing them to the situation. I think it's very helpful. Let me know what you think. And until next time, guys, you'll see part 2 tomorrow.